Isn't Jesus wonderful? Go back up to minutes. There we go. So a doctor answers the phone at his house, and he hears a familiar voice of a colleague on the other side. And the colleague says, "We need a fourth for poker." "I'll be right over," whispers the doctor. As he's putting on his coat, his wife asks him, "Is it serious?" "Oh, quite serious. In fact, there's already 3 doctors there." So, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Over the last 3 weeks, we've looked at the 2 witnesses, and we've looked at what they do and how their ministry goes, who they are. We looked at how important it is to look and see them as an example of how to hold your witness, and how important it is to hold that witness, no matter what persecution you might be under, because we have nothing to fear. The worst thing that can happen is we die and go to heaven. So, these men, we looked at them, we looked at how they're a symbol of God's grace and his mercy and his protection. And he's an example of their patience, of his patience, I'm sorry. They're an example of his patience. And how he's giving everyone one last chance to turn. These men are a symbol of how God never gives up completely, even knowing how humanity may never return. He died for everyone in spite of the fact that many will reject him, but he still did. Only God knows when a person is beyond saving. We don't. So we have to treat them all as if there's still time. He knows that the people left on earth during the second 3.5 years, or during the actual tribulation, have gotten to that point. So he can judge freely, though he wishes he didn't have to. They won't choose him because of their own delusions of grandeur. And that may sound harsh, but let's be honest here. They assume their way is better, that their knowledge is greater, that their culture is superior, and that no one, not even God himself, can tell them differently. I'm sure that will not sound familiar to this world at all. They certainly will never let anyone tell them how they can or can't live their lives the way they want to, or that their choices will send them to hell simply because they refuse to admit that they're wrong. Delusions of grandeur. Sin deludes us. It's what it does. But our choices are never beyond our ability to recognize them and avoid them. Otherwise, it would never be just to hold us responsible for them. He could never send us to hell if our choice in the matter were removed. He's always just and good. And people need to remember that when they want to criticize the idea of God sending them to hell. They do that. The punishments that he will now dole out upon the earth are just. And he is not only judging the people only, he is directing it at the gods of the world. We spent a little time on that last week. I want to spend a little more time on that this week about this topic. And we'll get into angels and demons and things in the next weeks. Finally, what they are, where they're from, what we can glean from Scripture. Now, don't confuse my meaning when I talk about this. I do not mean that these gods exist in the form they claim to. I do not mean that there is a literal Zeus or Marduk or Baal, Hadad or Thor or Hercules or Aphrodite as they claim to be, as they've been drawn, as they've been sculpted or shown in movies. What I mean, and this needs to be clear, is that there are entities, angels that fell and demons that show up, and they are locked away, most of them, not all of them. And before that and after that, they sought worship from man. And they established themselves as gods. And so the point being that these gods that they believed in, they set themselves up as the gods of old or the former gods. They've claimed to be kicked out of their domain by the God of heaven after he became angry and or jealous and kicked them out of or destroyed their home, depending on which culture you look at. They've changed names, but they always demand worship. They always want attention. This is the thing about especially demons. They love attention. So you have to be careful. The greatest trick the devil ever played is convincing the world he doesn't exist. We've heard that phrase. The greatest trick the devil ever played is convincing the world that he doesn't exist. So you've got two polar opposites. You can end up spending too much time and see the devil or demon in every shadow and every event in your life. Or the other opposite people get into is that they give him no attention whatsoever. They think it doesn't exist and that the supernatural world is just quaint explanations before science came around. Both are wrong. They are legit, they are real. The Bible wouldn't spend so much time dealing with them if they weren't. Jesus himself wouldn't talk about demons if they weren't a thing. He would have corrected people. If Jesus doesn't know what he's talking about, well, we got bigger problems than whether or not they exist at that point. But there are real entities that seek worship and attention, and they've always done this. They like to change their names. They are very territorial. They war with each other using the people that worship them throughout history. They've misled their worshipers to war and sin to end up in hell. Satan started it, but he was not the only one involved. He's not the only one that keeps them going. We use the word gods, keeps the idea clear, but it's what God himself called them when he said that he would judge the Elohim of Egypt. Exodus 12:12. The word is Elohim. It means gods. It's plural. It's not a name of God, even though it's used of him justly. It is a generic word like our word God is. Paul tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Ephesians 6:13. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, rulers of darkness in this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. This war that we are in against these things, not the people we run into every day, not the people we get mad at, not the people that cut us off in traffic, it's the demons behind it. And I'm not saying the demons are behind everything. I just mean that's what we're warring with. That's why Jesus could hang on that cross and say, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Why? Because he wasn't looking at them. It was the demons that were pushing this agenda that wanted him dead. The people didn't get the spiritual war that they were in. Jesus understood it enough to know even though they're responsible for the choices, he can still ask forgiveness because he understands what's really going on. And that's how we have to be as Christians. We have to understand that, as Paul says, we don't war against the people. We war against the spiritual entities behind them, the demonic influences, the systems that corrupt them. They are just caught in it. Paul also tells us that behind every idol is a demon. 1 Corinthians 10:19-20. What say I then? That the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is any such thing? That's what was sent to him. But I say, in response, that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, not to God. And I would not have you in fellowship with devils. If they aren't real, then that's not even possible. If they're just blocks of wood, you're not in fellowship with demons. There's a demon behind every idol. It's well established, but it's often ignored, that this is the position that we're in the position of the demons and the fallen in this world. It's called a supernatural worldview. And if I can impart nothing else to you in my time, please understand this view. That really what we know here around us means nothing in the grand scheme. That what's really going on is a spiritual battle for people's souls. And we're here to bring the gospel to them. To not only answer that battle, but open the doors and reconcile them with the Father. These dimensions that we enjoy are the lowest. And only because God created us the way he did originally and loves us so much is the only reason we matter. We don't deserve the attention. We do not want to become overly obsessed with the myths or concepts, but I want you to understand that they're not just quaint beliefs. They're just made up. Humanity sought to explain natural phenomenon through the supernatural because they were told to. Because the supernatural explained it that way. And if we're honest, can you prove them wrong? Can science say, for instance, that a demon cannot cause an earthquake? Can they prove that? Can you prove that? Or a hurricane, or a storm, or flood. It may sound crazy, but when Jesus spoke to the storm in Mark 4:39, he used the words siapao phimoo. It's a phrase that's addressed to a person. Siapao is ordering them to remain silent, telling them to choose that option. It's used for a person, not a generic in Greek. And phimo means to muzzle or clamp the mouth shut, as in removing the ability to talk, which means they have to have it first. So not only is he using authority to shut the mouth, but he's addressing it at something that's causing the storm. It's not an unconscious force of nature. This idea pervades everything in the Bible. Over and over again, we are shown that we are not alone. We are consistently shown in Scripture that we are being watched, that there are warriors surrounding us, that enemies tempt us, that there is a war that involves us and is happening all around us, that we entertain angels unaware, etc., etc., etc. This is reality. And this is why some practices are so wrong in the Bible. The belief of speaking to the dead, what we call necromancy, arose from the old Amorite, Babylonian, Sumerian, and Akkadian views. That the dead were the spirits of past rulers and family that now have power as the dead. And so talking to them, you could gain their power. Honoring them, you gain their power. The spirits passed on, but they actually have more power in this form. The Babylonian kings had a version called the Table of Kings. And they believed that all their best kings, when they died, were elevated to this position as supernatural rulers at a table. And they oversaw the affairs of man and could intervene in them. And so the king could make a pact with these creatures. And they would give him power. And if he did well, he would get to ascend to that level when he died. If you've ever heard of, they are known by many different names. They're literally called the Repha, the Rapuim, or the Rapa. It's a Semitic term for what we call demons. In the scripture, they're known as spirits, or shades, or demons, or unclean spirits, etc. If you've ever heard of a thing called the Code of Hammurabi, it's quoted as the source of Code of Hammurabi. It's an old Babylonian code of ethics, ethical conduct. It's supposed to be the standard for law today. It's not, but Hammurabi was a very famous Babylonian king. Except his name, you have to understand, their names were chosen. When they ascended to the throne, they chose their names. There were 4 people named Hammurabi because they chose the name. The name means descendant of the Repa, or descendant of the Rephaim, or descendant of demons. This was, you have to understand, this was their mindset. This is what they thought. They didn't completely lie. They were departed spirits of the giants who were judged by the flood. But they were still seeking to be in power like they were in life. They simply manipulated the truth to get people to believe, and us today, to believe however they need to get us there. The Phoenicians believed that their versions lived in the earth, and that some, called the Apkallu, came to the surface to carry messages to and from the gods who were hiding from the God of heaven. They lived in a hidden place called the Apsu. You'll know the word. It means abyss. And remember, this is Phoenician, where they had been banished as a consequence of the Great Flood, according to a scroll called the Epic of Ara. Does that story sound familiar? It should. It's in the Bible. In fact, when you understand what Nimrod was really doing, we understand just how far it goes and why God had to stop him. It wasn't building some sort of skyscraper, which is something we have today. He was building over what he believed to be the abyss because of what these entities had taught, and that he could get to heaven. The Anunnaki, or the gods of old, were the Sumerian versions. It depends on which side of the river you're on as to what you called them. And they were the old gods of heaven. Let me show you something. In Genesis, we meet Abraham and Sarah and the family. we meet his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and then we meet Jacob and Esau, right? We know the stories. So Jacob scams Esau out of his birthright. You have to understand, in this culture, that's a major deal. That's a permanent thing. So, of course, they feud. Jacob flees. He meets this girl named Rachel. Her father, Laban, offers Jacob a deal. Work for me 7 years, and you can marry her. So, he agrees. But what happens after 7 years? Does he get Rachel? No. He gets Leah. She hadn't been married yet. So he agrees to stay on 7 more years to get Rachel. In chapter 31, they realize that they're not getting an inheritance, that he doesn't really care about Jacob. Jacob is told by the Lord to go back to his father's land. So Jacob sneaks away in the night with his wife and their servants, and they would have done it secretly, was the plan. Rachel decides to take something. She decides to get her own inheritance. In verse 31:19 of Genesis, and Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Then he rose to find them and realizes they're gone. His daughters are gone. His idols are gone. Jacob had fled with them. Laban wouldn't stand for this, so he gives chase. It takes 7 days to meet with him. And in verse 26, he confronts Jacob. And Laban said to Jacob, "What hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me, and didst not tell me, that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with songs, and tabret, and with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Thou hast done foolishly in doing so. It is in my power of my hand to hurt you. But the God of your father spake to me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob, either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because he longs for his father's house. Yet wherefore hast you stolen my gods?" He's willing to let him go, but not his gods. And that's what got his attention. So he's mad. He's mad that they secreted it away, but you have to understand, in their culture, that's what you did. The son would go meet daughter, be betrothed. He'd leave, go back to his parents' house, add on to the house. And when it was time, he'd go get her. She never knew when it was. He would show up one day and take her back. So it was normal. The daughter didn't stay with the parents. So this is not weird. What was weird is that he stole his gods. Jacob didn't know anything about Rachel doing this. Laban insists on searching. He goes through the stuff, accuses people. He gets to Rachel. Rachel was sitting on them. Said it was her time of the month so that he wouldn't make her stand and prove it. So he leaves it alone. Now, the word here for these gods is teraphim. It's translated in some as household idols. The idea behind these, though, are from the Amorites. So, as we've discussed in their culture, when your grandparents died, you didn't take them to some far-off cemetery next to a church or a cathedral. You buried them in your house, right in the floorboards. So every new moon, they would come back to eat. Your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, all your aunts and uncles, they all came back. You were responsible for taking care of any family that didn't have direct descendants, because the underworld was barren and they would starve to death. They're dead, but they would starve to death. And then they became evil spirits. They became vengeful because they had been forgotten. And that's how they explained these entities that they kept running into. So these entities had convinced them, well, if you honor us before this happens, we won't turn bad. This could make days like Father's Day a little easier in their culture. Don't make me mad. You better get me nice gifts. If you anger me, my blood pressure goes up, I die, I will haunt you. You think your mother-in-law is a pain now? What have I done to deserve such ungrateful children? You're going to put me in the grave early, and then what? Then I'll be tormenting you from that side. You can't kill me twice, but you'll try. Anyway, I've told you this, but what I didn't tell you is that it was not just about keeping the dead relatives happy, but also because they gained power from these dead relatives. They could and would bless the family members with success and riches and peace and happiness if the members of the family continued to honor them. So they would offer them meals, they would pray to them, they'd burn incense and other things. And this might sound familiar too. We do the same thing. We honor the dead. It's called venerating them. You may notice we even treat people better sometimes when they're dead than we ever did in real life, when they were alive. We tend to forget most, if not all, their mistakes. There's the whole don't speak ill of the dead phrase we used to use a lot. We still talk about our deceased family members looking down on us or helping us, guiding us. This belief still exists today. This is why in Asian cultures they would have a shrine to the dead in the house. It's not uncommon. Or they'd have them outside, and you would go on a regular basis and light incense at the graves. That's where it came from. This is why Halloween developed in literally every ancient culture, not just the Irish. They just like to pick on us. But every culture had Halloween because the god of the dead was also the god of harvest. So you got to do both. They really got them double that way. But they were taught to do this, both before and after the flood, as a way to gain praise for themselves. These demons wanted this, and they promised favor in return. And what you'd do is you would make little statues of each of the family members, and you would honor them at that little set in your house. Well, Rachel stole these. This is what she stole. She stole little statues of her ancestors that were supposed to be honored to bless the family. If I pray to this guy long enough, my uncle will let me win the lottery, kind of thing, you know. And she took them. She's part of Phoenician culture. This is where they were. What you have to remember, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not the rest of the area. They knew him. They followed him. They built the Jewish line. He was not the God to the rest of the world at that point in their minds. They had their own. This is how the world viewed it, okay? She took her ancestors to get blessing on her new married life. That adds a different dynamic, doesn't it? Because now you start to see their family in a slightly different light. Their family was not a happy one, was it? It explains a lot about the discord that we see over and over again in their family. There were idols in the house. Now, on top of this, Laban wants to make a covenant with Jacob to make everything happy. So in verse 44, they decide to cut a covenant, and Jacob sets up a stone altar. He and Laban make their statements, and it all seems fine. And in Genesis 51, it reads very nice. And Laban said to Jacob, "Behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness. I will not pass over this heap to your side, and you will not pass over that heap or pillar to my side to harm. So I won't come past this point to harm you. You won't come past this point to harm me. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father judge between us." And Jacob swore by fear of his father Isaac. Now, if you just read it, it sounds like a wonderful sentiment. Don't come into the other person's territory for harm. So it's not really like the nice thing it sounds like. It's really just, don't cross my fence. You thought you had trouble with your neighbors. But we got to look at some details here. Like I said, the God we know and worship, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the true God, the creator, was not everybody else's God at this point. Remember, this is just as the Jewish line is starting, and you had Jews and Gentiles, because Gentiles didn't worship God. He was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Only the family knew this God. Laban even references him as your family's God. Okay? Their spouses, as you see, bring their culture with them, bring their gods with them. This was a problem for Solomon. You got that many women around, and they all brought their own culture and gods. And he didn't fix the problem. So, everybody's living their own truth with their own gods, their own way, their own life. And usually the translators do a very commendable job on this, and we know most of the problems that exist. They're well researched. There's a couple things in this one that are weird. One, there are two Nahors in Abraham's family. One is his brother, one is his great-grandfather, okay, or his grandfather. His grandfather's dead. He was an Amorite like Abraham was. Abraham came from the same culture. He didn't believe in Jehovah. He'd never met him. His brother went out, got married the same time as Abraham, had kids, created an estate, started his own city in Mesopotamia. He didn't follow Abraham, nor Jehovah. We see that in Genesis 24. So Laban is swearing by the God of people who did not believe in Jehovah. Abraham only started to later. Laban knew where Abraham was from. They're from the same area. The word Elohim is used again. He never said Jehovah. He said, we'll make this on the gods of Nahor and the gods of Abraham and the gods of their fathers. You're going back into Amorite culture. So, the only one that unites them all is your Amorites and their relatives. So he's honoring by them. By swearing with Laban in this, he's not swearing Jehovah. Jacob is stuck in a position. His wife's got, he doesn't know this yet, but his wife's got the idols of the Amorite ancestors, and he's in a covenant that he's asked to swear by them. And verse 53 ends with, and Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Right? Jacob does not necessarily swear by the gods, he swears out of fear for Isaac. So he either respects and fears his father so much that he thinks his father would be mad at him for not cutting the covenant, and so he agrees. Depends on how you take this statement. Or he swears by Jehovah on his own. So you got to notice the situation. And it's interesting because this is when they stay, they have a nice meal, they say goodbye. Next morning he leaves, and on his way back, he meets the Lord, who sets him straight, or crooked, because he touched his hip. But that's when that happens. Right after this, the Lord shows up and sends him on his way. Okay, yet again, wonderful info, Pastor Stephen. What does any of this have to do with me right here, right now, especially on Father's Day? Good question. It is a weird sermon for Father's Day. I'll sidestep you there. One prevailing theory in marriage and family therapy that I like a lot is called intergenerational family therapy. And it involves a major concept called multi-generational transmission process. This is actually what I'm presenting on tomorrow. This means you are not just yourself. Lots of voices. No, you are not just yourself. You are the product of your family. About 3 generations back at least. I know you're all shocked. You never thought that. But your values, your anxieties, your dreams, your assumptions, your fears, your beliefs are as much a product of the previous generations as they are of anything you've done. Each of us has a thing called roles. And everybody in this room has bare minimum 3. And I'm including my youngest. At least 3 roles, okay? You have the role of American citizen. That's everybody here. You have a role of a son or a daughter, citizen. You have a role of a son or daughter of citizen. You have a role of an employee or an employer or a student or a veteran or a soldier. Roles of male and female, boyfriend, girlfriend, provider, mother, father, spouse, sibling, or just a friend. Those are all roles that we have. And what's interesting about roles is that everyone here, everyone you know, has expectations about those roles. And they have expectations on you about how you fulfill that role. We all have multiples, and we all have expectations for all those roles. And those expectations are as varied as the people who know you and have them. So, every one of you has an expectation, at least one, or a set of expectations for me, for instance, as your pastor. Every one of you has a set of expectations for how I should be, what I should say, what I should not say, my day-to-day, my responsibilities, my behavior, everything. Okay? It is. Right or wrong, you all have them. And it creates enormous pressure at times for everyone in any role to have to meet all the expectations that a person has for them. You've all experienced it at some point if you think about it. And every one of us, it can create pressure and irritation and pride and joy and anger and sadness depending on whether or not you meet them or don't meet them. Let me ask you, who taught you to expect what you expect? Who taught you what a pastor should be? That I should wear a suit? That I should have gone to seminary? That I should have a college degree? Everybody has expectations. Where did you get them? Let me pick on you. Jenny, who taught you to be a wife or a mother or a homemaker or even a woman? Where did the expectations for that role come from? Television, the books, internet, your mother, your grandmother, every other woman you know. Josh, who taught you what a man should be? How a husband should be? How a father should be? Okay. See? We all have them, and they are all transmitted. But truthfully, no, they're transmitted through your family. We add ourselves to them, we modify them, and we find ways to satisfy as many of the expectations as we can. I expect my children to behave in a very specific way, but I doubt any of you have the same expectations for my children that I do. You may have them, they may be similar, but they're not the same. How many parents in here have ever had another parent comment on how they should raise their kids? Every parent. We all know it. Or just experience societal pressures from others. How we should raise them, how should we train them, how should we reprimand them, how many times you hit them with a stick, whatever. Oh, sorry, no. You've seen how hard it is in your lives to meet these pressures. You all have. Some carry a lot more than others. Sometimes people, for instance, who aren't even parents will try to tell you how to raise your kids. Sometimes people who aren't married will tell you how to be a spouse. Or people that have been divorced way too many times to ever have a comment on anything marriage related. They are not the best marriage and family therapists, I'm just telling you. But the funny thing is, you still try. And when they comment, does it upset you? Yeah. Because it still is pressure from an expectation on a role you have. Okay, that's great, Pastor. I think you got sidetracked. Maybe I did. That's beside the point. Let me ask you, why do you think the people we talked about, like the Amorites, why do you think they believed what they believed about their gods and about their culture and about their dead family? Why do you think they swore on the gods of their fathers? Why do you think Jacob swore because of the fear of his father? Why did they find it acceptable to have idols in the house? Why did they worship Jehovah instead? Who taught them? Genesis 31:19 says, "And Laban went to shear the sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's." Not up there, whatever. But her fathers, Rachel and Leah, brought with them idols and shared belief of the Semitic cultures, but also the belief of their ancestors. And Jacob has spent a lot of time here, but he met God. He knew who to follow. What happened to these idols? Does anybody know? In chapter 35, Jacob calls his household to bring out all their idols and all the precious things devoted to them, and he buries them under a tree, cleans house. And these were the idols, if you read, of his sons and his wives and his servants. Even all of them, they had all begun to worship these false gods. But who fixed it? Jacob. He got rid of them. He corrected it. He allowed it, and then he corrected it. He removed it. He wanted only Jehovah for his house. He made his mistakes, major ones, but he always knew who to turn back to and who to trust. He knew who was leading him. You can always actually tell when he's doing good, because God has this little thing. He renames him Israel. But he calls him Israel when he's doing good. When God calls him Jacob, he's doing something bad. Same thing happens with Peter and Jesus. These idols and their beliefs persist because the fathers held the position of teaching the children, of allowing things in the house. They were responsible. Things get passed by family, by mothers, by sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, great-grandparents, and fathers. But those things can be stopped. Those transmitted ideals, values, expectations, beliefs can all be mitigated, retaught, discouraged, removed, if you recognize them and take responsibility in them and take a role in dealing with them. It helps when you have these issues and you don't know why your family does this or why this happens and this happens, as you can chart this back and you can see where it comes from. But let me end with this. The word father, I'll end on this. The word father appears 970 times in the King James Version. Mother, 290 times. Not to disparage the role women have. You should know me well enough to know I would never do that. But what does that tell you about the role of father? It's crucial. Research argues on the exact percentage, but between the parents, the kids are more likely to attend church if which parent goes? The father. Up to 90% depending on the study. And as low as 20 if only the mother goes. It's not a behavior they will continue into adulthood. As I've pointed out, the Bible has a lot of expectations on men as a husband and as a father. It has expectations on the wives. We all know the phrase, wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives as what? Jesus loved the church. How much does Jesus love us? And what did he do for us? He died. So what does that mean? Women can be called to submit in the home, but men are called to die, especially to ourselves and our customs and our flesh. We carry the responsibility of the whole family in God's eyes. If the family fails, it's our fault. Well, my husband left me. Well, you proved my point. He failed. More so, men, are we men that our wives can submit to? Are we the kind of husbands that our wives can find security and love and acceptance and leadership in? Can they trust us? If a woman has true security in a relationship, you will notice that she blossoms when she feels that she can. Can they become who they're meant to be? Can they grow and flourish with us, guys? Are we the fathers we're meant to be? We teach our children to worship what we worship. So if we're teaching our kids to worship God the Father, great. But are we teaching them to worship something else or someone else? On Father's Day, are we pointing our sons and daughters to God or to a hobby? Are we training them to be the men they should be? Not because of our expectations alone, but by the expectations that God has put on them for all men. How can we lead our home, our family, if he can't lead us? If we can't die to self and let him lead, we can't be leaders. How will our children know who to worship, who to swear by, or who to live for if we don't teach them and model it as good leaders in our mistakes, our successes, and everything in between? We have to stand for right in our home where it matters. Stand for right in our marriages, our jobs, our friends, our children. Open, honest, and even vulnerable. So they can see that we may be human, but we know who to lean on. Let's stand and sing.